Who is this shrouded, sadistic, sordid fiend who maims and murders? Why this bloodthirsty orgy, this holocaust of lives?
Ciao, everybody.
Ciao.
I wanted to say that because of the topic today. I thought that would be relevant.
The topic is Giallo films.
Yes, it is.
Yes. I don't know much about Giallo films. So
I know.
You're gonna tell me about them.
Well, that's good because I know a lot about them, and I've actually been wanting to do this topic for a really long time because it's one of my very favorite genres.
Yeah, we're on
subgenres.
We're on a horror network, so we can do this one.
Yeah. And I kind of actually in the future I kind of want to mix in more horror stuff.
More horror fiction, and we have writers and stuff that are in the network.
Yeah.
So it can be some crossover.
Yeah. I mean, we did do that show that was about The Shining and stuff like that. Yeah. That was like our first episode.
Right.
So I kind of want to throw in a few more of those.
Yeah, and I've seen a few Giallo films. I was a kid, I used to run into them a lot.
Yeah.
Especially like the covers, the posters, they're all illustrated and gross and shit.
Yeah.
My mom wouldn't let me watch that when I was a kid. So.
Probably a wise move.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them are super, because they were European, a lot of them were super gory and super smutty.
Yeah, and they kind of had an underground kind of feel to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were. Right. I mean, they were pretty much like, they're kind of like classier exploitation cinema. Like over here, you get like the grungy kind of exploitation flicks and stuff like that. They were like that, but, they could get away with a lot more.
Later on, I stumbled into a few of them, the cannibal ones and stuff like that.
Well, those aren't Giallo.
Oh, it wasn't?
No.
Okay, well, I wasn't really a fan.
Yeah. Well, I did like that. I do like Lucio Fulci zombie movies, though. Because they're super disgusting.
All right, we got anything you want to talk about? Anything you want to say first?
Well, the first thing is I need to make the announcement that you guys, The Unseen Hand, A New Exploration of Poltergeist Phenomena, that is my new book.
Yeah.
And it is now out in all formats.
Right, including audiobook.
Print, ebook, audiobook. Yeah. All formats are now available on Amazon for sale.
Right.
And if you're into poltergeist kind of stuff, which, I'm sure some of you are because we've done poltergeist shows on here. You guys are listening to them. Then you will probably love this book. It has 120 cases, I think I ended up writing about. Yeah. Like 120 poltergeist cases all the way back to the 1st century. Most of them from the last couple centuries, obviously, because that's where most of the
it took her a long time to research this book too.
Yeah, it did.
And it's got a lot of good testimony of witnesses.
Yeah,
and it's not just kind of bullshit cases. It's ones that were documented by law enforcement of the time, and people came to see it.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to stick with ones, ones that were super popular, even if they weren't investigated. Some of them I had to put in there just because they were so famous.
Right, and a couple of the famous ones you basically have to include are kind of questionable whether or not they were actually poltergeist, whether it was a hoax. But that you actually kind of point out that, this case really, such and such case here, this one may not really be
some people said it was a hoax. This is why they said that, blah, blah, blah. So I kind of try to keep it, neutral, but...
Yeah, it's balanced.
Yeah. But where people thought it was a hoax, I would say that.
Right. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. And also...
And the audiobook is long. It's expensive, but it's long.
It's 11 and a half hours.
11 and a half hours.
Long.
It's about, I think it's a 400-something page book.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's 400 pages on the dot, actually.
Okay.
The print version.
The print version.
Yeah.
Right.
So if you want that, and you can go get it and write me a review if you would. That would be really awesome.
Well, that's going to happen automatically anyway.
Yeah. And also, and as usual, we want to give a shout out to Project Entertainment Network and Armand Rosamilia, the guy who runs it. Horror writer. Awesome guy.
Yeah. Welcome to the podcast, our new podcasters. I mean, damn, our traffic is like tripled every week or every month, isn't it?
Yeah, I think actually our download numbers from just the audio version, not the YouTube version of the show, but the audio version of the show actually more than tripled in a month.
Right.
Like from February to March, the numbers were more than 3 times.
It's almost probably close to 2,000 downloads a month now, right? No, more. It was 1,000 downloads a week, wasn't it?
Yeah, something like that.
Right.
Which
so 4,000 or 5,000
that's
downloads.
rad.
Right, and growing.
Hooray! Yay!
So if you guys on the podcast, if you ever need to contact us, you want to ask us any questions, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and ask questions right there on the comment section of the video. Or you can contact us on Facebook.
Yeah, on the Facebook page, 13 O'Clock Podcast. We have it. Yeah, we have a page. Or you can contact me, Jenny Ashford, either on my author page or on my regular personal page. And, if you want to suggest topics, stuff like that, we've done some suggestions so far. It's like we only do one show a week, so we'll try to eventually get to all of them.
And if you have a podcast of your own, you want Jenny on as a guest to show her new book or anything, just contact us.
Yeah. That's fine. That would be cool.
Yeah, we've already got a bunch of stuff lined up, but we could always take more.
Yeah. Yeah, especially if it's like a paranormal type podcast, if you have one like that and you want me to, because I've been on a bunch of them.
And if she goes on as a guest, we'll announce that in the podcast. We'll probably throw it in the stream.
Yeah.
Because she's going back on tour, so, some of your fans may want to hear you on other shows.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah. All right, so that's pretty much all the housekeeping out of the way first, right?
Yeah.
Now, let's start talking about Giallo films. Yeah. I can't tell you how excited I am about this topic.
What does Giallo mean?
Well, it's just the Italian word for yellow.
Yellow. Why is it yellow?
Okay. The reason that they're called that is because in 1929, there was a publisher in Italy called Mondadori. All right. And they started publishing Italian translations of like American and British mystery crime thrillers. Agatha Christie, Raymond Chandler, that type of thing. Edgar Wallace, he's a British crime writer. And they all had these bright yellow covers. And there's pictures of them online, but they're really cool looking covers with like the cool artwork and everything like that with women in distress and all that. And these books were so popular and they churned out so many of them that the very color yellow became associated with that type of thing, because then other publishers started jumping into the mix and they started doing their own rip-off copies of translations, and they would do yellow covers too. So the color became associated with that genre. And at first it was a literary genre. Okay. Pretty much. And like I said, very influenced by American and British crime, noir type of stuff. Okay. Damsels in distress and hard-boiled detectives and all that kind of stuff.
Right. So it's almost kind of like a like Italian Pulp Fiction series.
Right. And, but then there were also kind of gothic elements to it too. 'Cause really the movie genre, and I think most people now, here's an interesting thing. Now in Italy, when you call a movie or a book a giallo, that's pretty much any thriller. Right? Mm-hmm. So any movie that we would consider a thriller, Basic Instinct, Silence of the Lambs, anything like that, they would consider that a giallo. Okay. But in English-speaking countries, giallo has a very specific genre.
Yeah, it's an Italian movie.
Yeah, well, it's an Italian movie with a certain set of characteristics. It's not just any, mystery film, which in Italy it is. Now, they make a distinction between a giallo is technically a murder mystery, but it's like got a lot of other elements. Now, it's not like a police procedural. They have a different word for that. And I think it's poliziotteschi or something like that. But that's a different genre. That's more like where the cop is the protagonist, like Dirty Harry or Death Wish or something like that. That's a different kind of movie. That's not the same thing.
Well, name a giallo that people might know.
Well, most of the giallos people know are probably the most famous ones are Dario Argento movies.
Yeah.
Bird with the Crystal Plumage, Deep Red, Tenebrae.
Okay, I never.
Stuff like that. They're, very, very famous.
Yeah. Never seen them.
But, that's because you're a Philistine.
Yeah, I never seen them.
Who doesn't know shit about horror.
Well, to tell you the truth, I really don't like Italian movies.
I know, but I know, but
there's a couple of the spaghetti westerns I like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like Good, Bad, and the Ugly. That's pushing it, though.
Yeah.
That's pushing it.
Well, they definitely have a different aesthetic.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically there were like a few, proto-giallo type films. And they were also actually influenced. There's a similar German genre called Krimi, which are kind of like the same kind of thing, like crime thriller, mystery thriller type of thing. But generally the first Giallo movie is The Girl Who Knew Too Much, Mario Bava. And that was from 1963. Now, a lot of the early Giallo films were strongly influenced by Alfred Hitchcock, particularly Psycho. But the weird thing is a lot of Hitchcock's later films were actually influenced by Giallo.
Huh.
So they kind of like influenced each other in a way.
Okay.
Now,
so why should an American horror movie fan be interested in Giallo movies?
Well, here's the thing. Okay. Giallo movies, like I said, they have a very particular aesthetic. It's not just a murder mystery. It's not just a crime thriller. It also has like all these other really cool like elements to it. Now, because it's Italian, it tends to have a lot of like really exaggerated like opera.
Right.
And it also, it's like lurid colors and like everyone is like, all the murders are super gory and like all that kind of stuff.
Back in the day, we used to call that spumoni. Very spumoni. You ever had spumoni ice cream?
Yeah.
It's Italian ice cream. It's got every flavor in it. It's like Neapolitan 4 times over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spumoni.
Italians would do that back in the day. They would just mix all kinds of stuff together.
But okay, so like I said, a Giallo, it'll usually have elements of opera. It'll usually have elements like a real grand guignol kind of feel, like super hyper violent. Also a lot of elements of gothic horror, some more than others. Traditional Giallo. What ended up happening, Mario Bava, he made Girl Who Knew Too Much, like I said, influenced by Alfred Hitchcock. That was in black and white. That one, it did okay, but it didn't really make much cultural impact. Then he made another one called Blood and Black Lace. Now, this one was, super saturated color. There was all these murders happening, at a model, what was it? A fashion house. Yeah. So it was all models and stuff like that. And it didn't do that great, but honestly, that movie was probably the template for all of the movies that came later. But what ended up happening was that Dario Argento, in 1970, he made The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. And that had a huge cultural impact. It was a huge hit. And then all these other, so it wasn't the first Giallo, but it was actually the one that kind of kicked off the whole Giallo heyday, which lasted about 10 years. They're still making them now. Right. But the ones now, I haven't seen them, but I've heard that they're kind of just pastiches and they're not exactly like the old ones were.
We just saw one in the theater that you said was looked like a Giallo. Remember?
We saw a movie in the theater?
Yeah, you and I went and saw it in theater.
Oh, shit.
Remember that? It was kind of like a haunted house movie.
Oh, Crimson Peak.
Crimson Peak, yeah. Wasn't that kind of like a Giallo movie?
No, that was a gothic horror. Okay. But the lighting was very Argento-esque.
Okay, I got you.
Was probably what I meant by that.
Okay.
But now, The Bird with the Crystal Plumage it kind of established a lot of the tropes. I mean, Blood and Black Lace did too, but here, generally, this is what happens in a Giallo film. The protagonist of the film they're usually not from wherever the film is set. So if the film is set in Italy, which Bird with the Crystal Plumage is, then the protagonist is actually American.
Okay.
So it's usually a tourist or they're there for so it's like an outsider. Right. And then while they're there, they witness a murder. It has nothing to do with them. They just happen to be walking past and unluckily they see a murder, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's usually, and Dario Argento did this a lot, there's usually some aspect of the murder scene that either they can't remember correctly or there's something wrong with it and they can't put their finger on it or something like that. So they spend a lot of the movie like kind of going over and going, what was the matter with that? Why did I, because that's like kind of the key to solving the whole mystery.
Okay.
And in a lot of Giallos, not always, but this is a pretty underlying current that the cops are usually skeptical of the witness. They either think they did it or they think they were imagining things or something like that. And then the cops are usually like not that effective.
Right.
In some cases, they're idiots.
Right.
usually the person that witnessed the murder is kind of put into the position of trying to figure out who the killer was before they get killed.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of the classic plot. That's not, they're not all like that. But I tend to think I'm like a Giallo purist. I'm like, if it's not a murder mystery, I feel like it's not a Giallo.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, because the whole point of the Giallo is you're figuring out who the killer is.
Right.
And in classic mystery thriller fashion, you usually have all these weird little clues. You have all these, like shifty characters that are like red herrings that could be the killer.
Right.
And shit like that. Or all have motive to be the killer.
We saw an Italian movie not long ago on, was it YouTube? Remember that?
Which one?
Was that a Giallo?
Which one are you talking about?
It was the one that had Brooke Shields in it.
Oh, that was not an Italian movie.
It wasn't?
No.
I thought it was. It just had Italian Americans in it.
Yeah.
That's right. It had to do with the Catholic Church.
That was
right?
kind of, yeah. It was Alice, Sweet Alice.
Alice, Sweet Alice.
That actually has some Giallo elements. Okay. I have seen that called a Giallo.
Okay.
I guess it could be under a super loose definition. I don't know. See, okay, there's a lot of back and forth about what's a Giallo and what's not. Like
that movie felt like an Italian movie watching it. The way it was edited and everything.
It did have a very Italian aesthetic.
Yeah. And everybody in it was Italian American, and they were at the Catholic Church all the time. There was murders happening.
Yeah.
You thought it was the little girl doing it, but it turned out it was a lady.
It did have a lot of elements of that. It also had a lot of elements of Don't Look Now by Nicholas Roeg. Yeah.
I don't know
that's a good. See, you don't know anything.
No, I don't know.
That's a classic. A classic. Donald Sutherland was in it. It was set in Venice.
Just so
with
you
the
guys
little girl in the red
raincoat. Just so you guys know, I hate fiction almost. I basically hate fiction. I don't like movies either. Very rarely.
Like movies?
I like some movies, like very few. Very few. And the ones I like, everybody else seems to hate.
Not
like I like Prometheus.
Yeah.
And nobody liked it.
I liked it.
Yeah. Okay.
Some people liked it.
and like horror movies and stuff like that, they don't really draw me in. Not scared. I don't think they're scary.
Well, a lot of them I don't think is scary. I'm interested in like.
And it's like the same thing.
Analyzing them.
They're real samey. Although I like the old 70s stuff.
Well, yeah. Well, that's what these are.
Yeah.
These were all 70s.
Yeah, but I didn't like those back then.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just don't like. There's something about the way that
why you always gotta be a hater?
I'm not a hater. There's just something about the way Italians edit things, and maybe it was the dubbing and the sound. It always.
Well, honestly, I would rather prefer and. Honestly, they did dub a lot of them into English because what they would do, and all Italian movies, they kind of did this. Mm-hmm. They would usually have actors from lots of different countries. They'd have Germans, they'd have British, they'd have Americans.
You couldn't tell what country this was happening in.
Well, no, not necessarily. But what they would do is they would have everybody speak in their native language, and then they would just dub everybody into the same language.
I remember them just looking and feeling like really extremely B-movie. That's how I remember.
Well, some of them were, but some of them were. It was just kind of like any other genre. There was like a handful of examples that were really good and they were big budget, and then there were like dozens and dozens of like cheap knockoffs.
Now we were watching that American movie. What was the one the guy that did Escape from New York and the thing? What's his name?
John Carpenter.
John Carpenter. We were watching that John Carpenter flick. Remember that about
Prince of Darkness.
Prince of Darkness. And then the way that killer killed that person, was it a pair of scissors or a knife? I don't remember. You said, man, it's right out of a Giallo movie.
Yeah. Well, and across. Actually, and I was actually going to talk about that later, but I guess it doesn't really matter. I can talk about it right now. Right. But even though this is like not even in order, but whatever. I was going to say that the Giallo movie was a huge, huge influence on American slasher flicks. Huge.
All right.
And actually, a lot of your, directors, John Carpenter, and even like the newer guys that like Eli Roth that does all the torture porn and stuff like that, are super, super into Giallo movies. And you can actually see it. Like I said, we were watching Prince of Darkness, John Carpenter. Not a great movie, gotta say. And I love John Carpenter. But
John Carpenter's hit and miss.
He's very hit or miss, and that one was really a miss for me. I really did not like Prince of Darkness. But there is one scene in it where that woman comes out across the courtyard to stab that guy with the scissors or the knife or whatever, and she's kind of floating. Yeah. And I was like, man, that is so Argento.
Yeah, it looked like he was on a skateboard.
Yeah, that was an Argento fucking homage right there. It had to have been.
Yeah. I'll tell you though, when Carpenter's on, he's spot on. I love Escape from New York. If you guys haven't seen Escape from New York, see that one. And, John Carpenter's The Thing, the original one.
Well, yeah, that's a classic.
Man, that scared me so bad.
Yeah.
When I was a kid when that came out. Man, that's still an awesome movie. And the acting is really good in those.
Yeah. 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 Okay, we were talking about, like, characteristics of a Giallo. Okay, so it's not just a murder mystery. There are also other stylistic elements. Generally, the killer is not revealed to the end. The killer is usually someone that's in this pool of, suspects, but it's usually the least person you expect. Most of the time, they fool me. Okay. Which is good. It's never the most obvious person. The killer usually is masked, or they are, they're wearing like a black trench coat, black hat, black gloves.
Yeah, they're in some kind of disguise.
Yeah, they're usually wearing a disguise. They never, ever use guns. Always knives, straight razors, sometimes ropes, but it's usually bladed instruments. Because it's kind of, it's like a phallic type of thing.
Plus, you gotta show blood.
Plus, it's bloodier.
Yeah. And the blood's always orange.
Well, it's like bright red. It's like tempera paint. Yeah. Because like I said, everything has to be super, super exaggerated. Right. Not always. They're not all like that. Some of them are kind of grittier, more realistic, especially Lucio Fulci's ones, which I kind of want to talk about one of his later because it's one that doesn't get a lot of love, I guess. Usually the victims are scantily clad women. Usually the characters are kind of jet set, real modern, hip kind of people. These photographers, models, artists. They're not usually poor people or just regular people. They're usually glamorous. They're usually really glamorous. And a lot of the sets and stuff like that, they're either like old Gothic kind of looking shit, or they're like ultra modern, hip apartments type stuff. And a lot of the fashions are like super up to date for, for whenever they were made, 60s or 70s. So they're really like hip looking people with all these really cool ensembles and stuff. Also, there's usually, and this is kind of mentioned a lot, usually the score of it, the music of it is actually pretty distinctive. And I think Dario Argento probably is the best known for this with his work with the band Goblin. He used a lot of prog rock, like really loud prog rock.
Like Alan Parsons Project?
Kind of, but it actually, you wouldn't think it works, but it actually does. It's really cool. Okay. And actually, I have a couple of Goblin CDs that had like all their work, because they didn't just work with him, they worked with a bunch of other directors as well. Okay. But a lot of their shit is really awesome. Like just to listen, especially their score for Suspiria. That's fucking awesome. I love it. Even though Suspiria is not a Giallo, and I'll fight you, but I'll talk about that later. But they'll also use like free jazz stuff like that. And here's the thing. A lot of contentions, there's a lot of contentions made about what's a Giallo and what's not a Giallo. There's this really good blog. It's actually a really nicely designed blog too, called the Giallo Files. And he makes the argument that a lot of Giallo movies that are considered Giallo movies are not Giallo movies. Like he says, Sergio Martino's All the Colors of the Dark is not a Giallo movie.
No, you're saying he. You see the guy who runs the blog?
Yeah.
What's his name? Do you know?
No, I don't know. I just kind of discovered this.
Okay.
Awesome. But, so, yeah, okay.
But he's good.
Yeah.
All right.
I like this blog, actually.
Okay.
But, and I don't know how I feel. He also says that The House with the Laughing Windows, which is considered a classic Giallo, is not a Giallo. Now, I can see why he says that. I wrote a blog post myself about both of those movies, All the Colors of the Dark and House with the Laughing Windows. And they do have some elements of Giallo, but they're not, it's not a classic Giallo.
Okay.
And there's another one, and I can talk about this one because I just saw this one the other day. This one actually turns up on a lot of lists, but I would not call this one a Giallo at all. And that is The Perfume of the Lady in Black. Other than the title, and that's another thing I could talk about because Giallo titles are the fucking best. I love them. Perfume of the Lady in Black. And it's usually considered a Giallo, but I don't think it's a Giallo. Because one, nobody really gets killed until the end. It's not like the classic Giallo, series of murders, and you're trying to figure out, like with the clues and stuff, and you're trying to figure out who the murderer is. Really, no one dies until the end, and there's no gore until the end. Also, it's not, it's more like the protagonist is, it's more like a Polanski film, honestly. Like Repulsion or like Rosemary's Baby or The Tenant, even though The Tenant came later, I think.
That was a weird movie.
Yeah. But it was kind of like that in the sense that the protagonist was this woman and you weren't sure if she was just going batshit or if there was this weird, like, conspiracy, like to drive her crazy or to get her to kill herself or who knows. And, a lot of the imagery was real dreamlike and you weren't really, it was really ambiguous. And don't get me wrong, I love that. But I don't think it was a Giallo.
Okay.
I don't think
it was just a regular horror movie.
It was like a psychological horror movie, I thought. But, you know, people could argue with me if they want to. Honestly, I think a lot of people call Suspiria a Giallo. And I think they're just doing that because Dario Argento made it. Because, yeah, Dario Argento made a shit ton of Giallos, and he's probably the best known. I say Giallos, it should be Jolly, sorry. But he made a shit ton of them. Suspiria, not really a Giallo. And here's the thing. I don't think it's a Giallo because it's supernatural. It's a supernatural horror movie. Now, I'm not saying that some Gialli didn't have, you know, supernatural elements. Because even, Deep Red, or Profondo Rosso, if you prefer, had kind of a supernatural element. Because the woman at the beginning was a psychic. And she was a real psychic. Like, she could read people's thoughts and shit like that. Okay. But I think there's a point where, I can swing with psychic, and it was still a Giallo in the classic sense, where there was a string of murders, and the guy had to figure out, like, what the shit was that he saw to figure out who the murderer was. But Suspiria, yes, there's a series of murders that are hyper-violent and weird and operatic and stuff like that. Yes, there is a prog rock score. Yes, there is this crazy, you know, super saturated, exaggerated lighting and stuff like that. But, dude, it's witches. It's not, you know what I mean? It's witches in a ballet school. It's like a coven. Okay. So it's like, it's not, I don't know. And see, that's the thing. And the person that writes the Giallo files, they also say that All the Colors of the Dark is not a Giallo, which I guess I can see because it kind of has the same thing as The Perfume of the Lady in Black. It's kind of like there's a satanic or black magic type of cult, and they're following this woman around, and you don't know if what she's seeing is real. Like, there's a guy walking around killing people, and you don't know if it's a real person or if it's just because she kept seeing it in her dreams and shit like that. So, if you want to call those Giallo, fine. I called them Giallo on my blog when I wrote about them, and I'm not going to get all butthurt about it. But Suspiria, not a Giallo. Okay. And neither is Inferno. Okay. And
I hope you guys know what she's talking about. I've never seen any of these movies.
Yeah, but see, that's what you assume though, because like a
lot of people watch these.
Well, yeah. Okay. Well, I wouldn't talk about it if nobody knew what I was talking about. What kind of retard do you think I am?
I'm just having fun, you know.
Just because, and you know what? I've been wanting to do this topic for a long time, but I knew he would be like this.
No,
because I knew he would be like this because I said,
you guys know what she's talking about. I don't know what she's talking about.
Because I said, I know that you're not going to know anything that I'm talking about, and you're just going to make fun of me.
No, it's good. No, it's good.
Because you're assuming that no one else knows what I'm talking about, either because you don't.
I don't do that.
Yeah, you do.
No, I don't.
Everybody knows what I'm talking about. Come on, everybody's seen Giallo movies.
That's awesome.
You guys are horror fans. You know who fucking Dario Argento is, at least. Jesus Christ.
First I've heard of it.
That's because you don't know anything.
Yeah, I don't know anything.
Well, you don't know anything about
It's almost time for a break, though.
Oh, shit, okay. Yeah. Okay, so here's the halfway point, and after the break, we'll come back and I'll just yap on and on more about because I love this topic, man. This is an awesome topic.
Tell them more about it.
Okay, well.
I'll walk you through it. You will walk me through it.
Well, yeah, I was going to say it's the other way around.
Yeah.
All right, we'll be back in just a few minutes.
Project Entertainment Network presents Buttercup of Doom with your host, Kelly Owen, just a girl who writes horror and thriller fiction, talks to bugs, jumps in puddles, and now hosts a weekly podcast full of opinions, advice, and a touch of gypsy wisdom. Whether it's current affairs or social media nightmares, join me as I rant and rave and offer up a big old bucket of common sense. Wednesdays on Buttercup of Doom.
Subculture Corsets and Clothing is our favorite store for unusual clothing, shoes, and accessories. They offer a wide selection of men's and women's clothing at great prices. Subculture also offers a cool selection of shoes and accessories. Steampunk, gothic apparel, retro, corsets, and so much more at Subculture Corsets and Clothing. Check out Subculture online at subculturecorsets.com. That's subculturecorsets.com. Make sure you use the discount code 13o'clock for a 10% discount. Subculturecorsets.com or visit their store in Jacksonville, Florida, just off I-95.
I'm Captain Dallas Lee, and I'm one of them characters in the Curtain Jerkers, Project Entertainment Network's Pro Wrestling Podcast. Every Friday, Token Top Lord Steve Mesa and the Viking Super Kick Pro Wrestling in the hot spot, featuring interviews with the up-and-coming indie superstars that are stable and shoots while it works. You can only hear them on the Project Entertainment Network. Thank you very much. Remember the Alamo!
Okay, and we're back. Talking about Giallo movies, which Tom doesn't know shit about.
No, I'm lost. No, I'm over here dog paddling. I'm just trying to figure out. I'm dog paddling in the sea of I don't know.
That's a very nice analogy.
Like that?
Yeah, I do. I like that very much.
Made it up.
You just made it up.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see. Where did I leave off? Oh,
I don't know. You were talking about your favorite Giallo movies and why some of them were Giallo movies and why some of them weren't.
Yeah.
Yes.
Here's the thing. Because there's so much overlap with other genres. With the gothic horror genre, film noir, even kind of, later slasher movies.
Who was the most underappreciated Giallo writer or director?
I don't know if any of them...
That was a good question, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I don't even know the subject. I'm just...
I don't know about underrated director, because I think all of them were pretty, pretty well liked at the time. Like I said, some of them were better than others. Like I saw some the other day, like 7 Bloodstained Orchids and, the Bloodstained Shadow, sorry about that, that I saw the other day. Classic Giallo. Not great, but, if you're kind of into that kind of thing, then, you'll dig it. But it wasn't like, wow, that was amazing. You know what I mean? Right. Not like, say, Deep Red or anything like that, which is kind of considered one of the best ones. But
now what
made
Italy different? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What made them make Giallo movies? What, didn't have access to TV? Were they making a lot of movies, or what was the deal?
Yeah, they were. But here's the thing: like I said, there are counterparts, like in other countries. Like I said, Germany had the Krimi films,
right?
And we kind of had slasher horror, to Psycho, Peeping Tom. Well, that was British, but that kind of shit. But for some reason, the Italians are super fun. I guess maybe it was because of their opera tradition. Mm-hmm. They are super into like sex and violence.
Okay.
So they said, well, we'll take a mystery, like or a crime thriller, and we'll just put tits and blood.
Okay.
Up to 11.
Up to 11.
Right. You know what I mean? And they did the same thing like with their zombie movies. It's just like, well, let's have zombies, but with more decapitation,
right? More
anal impalement,
right?
More tongues being pulled out, more of that. They're just, for some reason, they're super, super into that shit, and they really love to show. I mean, there's a great fucking scene in Suspiria, again, not a Giallo, but there's a great fucking scene in Suspiria where he just stabs me in the heart, and there's a heart. It's just like right there, and it's just like open.
When I was a kid,
and they just show a knife just like plunging into it.
When I was a kid, I was growing up in California, Southern California. And of course, we had a lot of people from Mexico living in the area. Mm-hmm. And they're, at the little corner stores, we'd find like Mexican magazines about movies.
Yeah.
And they had some bizarre shit going on in there too.
They did, yeah.
And like Mexican bandits, sicking, fighting roosters on guys, and they had blades on the roosters and it was cutting their heads off and crazy stuff like that, The Mexicans were into that too. They had the, Mexican wrestler movies. And they were,
like Samson the Silver Masked Man.
Yeah, they had like photographs of it in the magazines of wrestlers fighting each other, blood everywhere.
I kind of love that. Well, it's kind of like a cross genre between. I mean, I know people think it's weird, like the luchador type of stuff, like where they put him in, like Samson versus the vampire women and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, why would you put a Mexican wrestler like fighting vampires and stuff like that? But it's basically their version of a superhero.
Yeah, me and my buddies, we were like in the 3rd grade. We find those magazines at the newsstand there in Carson, California. And we'd be traumatized, man, look at all the blood. Oh man, they cut his head off with a rooster, just stuff like that.
Cut his head off with a rooster.
Yeah.
That's gonna be, that's gonna be the quote for this episode.
They cut his head off with a rooster.
They cut his head off with a rooster. I love it.
Yeah, and I think there was a woman in the mix too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think it was a photograph, it was a cartoon.
Yeah.
But it was like a billboard. It was, it was a drawing for like a movie poster.
Yeah.
Like how the Giallo movie posters are drawn?
Yeah.
It was like that, but it showed like a guy sicking a rooster onto another guy, and the blades on the back of the rooster was cutting the other guy's face off, and then there's like a half-naked woman in the mix too somehow.
Okay, we gotta find that.
Yeah.
That's the raddest thing I've ever heard of.
And the dude that threw the rooster, had a sombrero and a poncho and an ammo belt over his shoulder and lever action carbine. They look like cowboys. They're like gauchos.
Yeah.
Mexican cowboys.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually funny you brought that up because really the only other country besides Italy, where Giallo was like at a huge heyday, was Spain. And there were also a couple of good examples that came out of Spain too. But, Italy mostly. And it was really only a 10-year time period, kind of. It was from like 1968 to about 1978 was kind of the heyday. They were coming out like all the time. Yeah. Like there was like almost 70 movies like in this same genre. And like I said, none of them are fantastic. If you like the genre, you can see most of them on YouTube. Yeah. Now, like I said, there were a few made later, but actually, for my money, okay, because you asked me before about underrated directors and stuff like that. Like I said, I don't know about underrated directors, but one of my favorite Giallo movies, and this one also had a bit of a supernatural element, was by Lucio Fulci. Which, like I said, Lucio Fulci, most people in the U.S., I mean, they know he directed Giallo, but he's most famous for his like super gory zombie films. Zombie, The Beyond, House by the Cemetery, stuff like that. But he made some Gialli too. He made Don't Torture Duckling. He made New York Ripper. He made one on top of the other, which I guess some people consider a Giallo, even though it's kind of more an erotic whatever. I don't know what it was, but it had the chick from Danger Diabolique in it. But one of my favorite Giallo movies was actually made by him, and it's called, over here it's called The Psychic. It's actually probably known better as 7 Notes in Black, and it had that had a supernatural. Now this one was not like, it wasn't like super lurid. It wasn't, but it did have a lot of Giallo elements in the sense that, and it has this fucking thematic element. And I don't know if any of you guys know if there's a name for it. I don't know if there's a name for it or not, but what ends up happening is the woman who's the psychic is the main character. And at the beginning, she has a vision where she sees like this sort of disjointed, series of scenes. And the cool thing about the movie is that the way as the movie goes on and like each of these scenes like starts happening in reality, right? And so it's almost like you kind of know what's going to happen, but then you kind of don't, like, because it kind of subverts like, oh, I thought the version of the vision of this person being dead was going to mean this, and it's, you know what I mean? And her vision is kind of a mixture of like past, present, and future. So you don't know what already happened and what's going to happen. And it's a really, really good movie. And it's, like I said, it's not super gross like most of his zombie movies and stuff like that. I think probably the grossest thing in it is like a head wound, and it's not. I don't think I've seen an Italian zombie movie. Really? Yeah. You've never seen an Italian zombie movie? No, I don't think so. And you've never even seen like any of the real like nasty like Cannibal Ferox and all that kind of shit? No. Which those actually, is it Cannibal Ferox or Eaten Alive or a couple of the other ones? And actually those are still banned in a lot of countries mostly because it had real animal cruelty in it. Okay. Like they really killed animals in it and stuff like that. And actually there was a movie. I think it was Umberto Lenzi that directed, he directed Cannibal Ferox, but was it him? I can't remember if it was him or the other guy that got in trouble. He actually got brought to court because they thought he made a snuff film. Huh. Because that's how realistic there was. There was a zombie movie from I think it's from the early 80s, maybe the late 70s that I've been wanting to see. The only thing I ever saw was the poster for it. It was just called Zombie. And that's Lucio Fulci. Okay, and it has a rotten head. With the rotten head with the worm? Yeah, a worm. Yeah. I have that t-shirt that says "We're going to eat you" on it. Is that movie any good? Yeah, it's awesome. Oh, I gotta see it. It's like it's very Italian, but it's like it's super gory. Yeah, I gotta see that one. I probably have it on DVD in the attic actually somewhere because I have a lot of Lucio Fulci movies. Yeah, I gotta see that one. Yeah, you probably. I don't know. I wouldn't like it. I don't know if you'd like it or not. I haven't seen it for a long time, to be honest. Anything like Shockwaves? I liked the movie. I liked that. It was a good zombie. The Nazi zombies, aquatic Nazi zombies. Yeah. Well, now, is it... I can't remember. I think it was... it might have been Zombie, the Lucio Fulci movie. Yeah. Was it Zombie that had a zombie fighting a shark underwater? Oh, I gotta see it. I'm pretty sure it was that one. Oh, man. I'm pretty sure it was that. It's a famous scene. Yeah? It's a famous scene. Does it look really bad? Cheesy? Not really. I'm pretty sure it's a real shark. Though. How does a zombie fight a shark? Because they can't afford to like build a shark like in Jaws. It wasn't a mechanical shark, so they had to use a real one. Is he swimming? Is he floating? Or is he standing on I think he's standing on the bottom. Like I said, I haven't seen it in a long time. Yeah. I gotta see it. Well, yeah. How big is the shark? Well, it's not like Jaws size. Okay, it's not Jaws. It's like a pretty decent. Like a 5 foot shark. Yeah, like 5-6 foot shark. All right. It's probably just a diver messing around with a real shark. Yeah, it might be. Yeah. Like I said, I haven't seen it for a long time. Yeah. Now, I've heard that, I was going to say that, interestingly, even though Giallo were largely influenced, like I said, by American and British crime fiction, and also by Alfred Hitchcock, but then ironically, after the Giallo heyday had passed in the late 70s, they kind of became the springboard for the American slasher film. Now, an American slasher film is essentially a Giallo without the mystery element, which, as I said, makes it not a Giallo.
They're just getting down to the nitty gritty.
Yeah, they're just basically like boobs, blood, slashing, the end. It doesn't have, the whole point of a Giallo, I think, is that you have the reveal of the killer at the end, like a mystery. Right. And
what do you think the first American slasher film is? I know the first one I remember was just, Friday the 13th. But I know that wasn't the first one. That was the first one I remember.
No,
first one I saw.
That's the thing. People probably consider Psycho the first. That was like a proto-slasher. I would call that a proto-slasher.
No, I'm talking about a full-fledged slasher.
A full-fledged slasher. That's a good question. Yeah. I'd have to look. But,
did Halloween predate?
Halloween was 1978.
So that was before
Friday
the 13th.
Yeah.
Now, what was Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
That was 74.
So that you were going, okay.
Was that a slasher, though? I don't know if I'd call that a slasher.
I think it probably was.
Yeah. That's another thing. See, I don't know. You kind of like, it when you see it.
Right.
But I guess you could call Texas Chainsaw Massacre a slasher.
I would
Even though
think so.
They didn't show that much in it, though. The cool thing about Texas Chainsaw Massacre is that they didn't show a lot, but they made you think that you saw a lot, which is kind of a genius thing to do. It's hard to pull off.
Okay.
But actually, since you brought up Friday the 13th, and I was talking about the influence of the Giallo in the slasher film, if Friday the 13th Part 2, you guys, if you remember the iconic scene in there where like the two, where the couple is fucking and Jason comes in and stabs both of them through the bed with a spear. Yeah. Okay, that scene was straight up ripped off from a Giallo film. Right. Twitch of the Death Nerve. Probably better known as Bay of Blood over here. Mario Bava's hyper violent Giallo film. I saw it recently. I'd been wanting to see it for a long time and I finally got around to seeing it. And that film was batshit. Yeah. I couldn't believe how batshit it was.
Friday the 13th Part 2 is pretty good. That was the best one, I think, out of the genre. And I remember seeing that thing, and I was being over at my cousin's house in Mississippi. Spend the night over there. He had a big old house. And we'd stay up late at night and watch MTV or on TV. What was it called? HBO. Yeah. We'd watch HBO and Cinemax and then come on. I spent the rest of the night scared walking around, afraid I would see Jason around every corner.
Well, yeah, those were pretty scary for back in the day.
And we were out of the country.
The thing that distinguishes a slasher film from a Giallo, there's not a lot of distinctions. Okay. But like I said, a Giallo has the killer reveal identity at the end. Right. A slasher, you pretty much know who the killer is. All right. Like Halloween, it's Michael Myers. Yeah. Jason, it's Jason Voorhees. Well, the first one was his mom, but
In Giallo, spoiler alert, you don't know until the end.
So it's more like a traditional like Agatha Christie whodunit type of thing, except with like super violent and gothic elements. And like I said, some of them more than others. Like if you want to say one that's kind of more in the gothic genre, The Night Evelyn Came Out of the Grave, which I always like to say, spoiler alert, but but that's the name of the movie. And that was another thing I wanted to mention. They all have the best fucking titles. I love Giallo titles. And okay, whoever out there in internet land made the do-it-yourself Giallo website where you can just go and it gives you a title and a director name and a plot outline.
Yeah, it just generates it.
And it just generates them.
Check that out. It was pretty good.
They are delightful.
Yeah, do one.
And actually, the one that's up right now is a gecko that stands in the center of the ever-widening pool of red. Directed by Fulvio Lucci. Yeah.
Generate another one.
Okay, let's see. What does this one say? Moonlit shadows on a frozen landscape. Directed by Franco.
Yeah, it sounds about right. Okay.
6 dead orchids in a frozen landscape.
Okay.
See, there are traces of dark red on a blue satin pillow. Actually, I kind of like that one. That's kind of rad.
Umberti.
Yeah. Well, because there's Umberto Lenzi was one of the directors that was kind of well known. But yeah, so I did talk about the psychic. I like that. But yeah, gothic horror elements, shit like that. Also, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit, too, about here's one thing. One thing I always really liked about Giallo movies, and they don't always do this, but I like the trope, and Dario Argento did this a lot, as I mentioned, where the person that witnesses the crime that kicks off the whole movie, there's always like some little detail that's bugging them. And like they spend the whole movie like, spoiler alert, you guys, but I'm sure most of horror fans have seen like Deep Red and have seen Bird with the Crystal Plumage because they're kind of classics of the genre. But, say Bird with the Crystal Plumage, beginning of the movie, the American guy is walking past an art gallery and it has big glass front and it's at night and he sees two people struggling, like a woman and a man. And it's a man in a black hat and in a black trench coat struggling with a woman. And then she gets stabbed. He runs in and tries to help her, but then the killer pushes a button and closes the glass doors on the other side. So he's trapped between these two glass windows and he's like just watching her. Mm-hmm. And she does get saved eventually, but he keeps replaying the scene in his head going, man, something was the matter with that scene. What was it? I can't figure it out. And he's like, I just feel like if I could figure it out, then I would know who the killer was. And the detail that he couldn't place so that he couldn't figure out, spoiler alert, was that when the two people were struggling, the woman had the knife in her hand instead of the man. So you think the whole thing, you think the man is the killer. Right. But really it was her. She was trying to stab the guy. And And the same thing happened in Deep Red. Yeah. The British writer who he sees the psychic woman being killed up in her apartment window. And the thing that's bugging him is that he's like, when I looked up in the window, he's like, I thought I saw a painting like behind her. And then when he went up to the apartment with the police, he's like, it wasn't there. So he's like, what happened? Who took it and why did they take it? So for the whole thing, it was bothering him. And then it turns out at the end that it actually wasn't a painting that he had seen, it was a mirror. And he had actually seen the killer's face in the mirror. And he didn't, when he went in there and saw the painting, he's like, I didn't see a painting that looked like what I saw. It's because he's the killer's face in the mirror. And, same thing kind of happened. And another thing too, and I forgot to mention this, but that another aspect of Giallo, this is also really common. And this trope probably came from Psycho and from Alfred Hitchcock, I would imagine. But whoever the killer is, they usually have some kind of madness or mental illness that is spurred by a childhood trauma. Usually sexual in nature, or they witness their parents killing each other or something like that. Right. Like in Deep Red, the protagonist, saw their mother kill their father. Yeah. And, shit like that. And sometimes they'll show like flashbacks of that kind of thing. But there's usually like a real psychosexual element to the killer's motivation, if they have any. Sometimes it's just something simple like blackmail. I tend not to like those as much because the thing that I like about Giallo is it's over the top. Yeah. Kind of operatic elements. So the ones that are kind of more low key, that are just kind of like, oh, well, this person was blackmailing all these people. They're still all right, but it's not quite as fun. Right. That's why I feel like Dario Argento's are a lot more fun than ones like the Seven Bloodstained Orchids, where I'm pretty sure it was just blackmail that linked all the victims. And actually that was another one where the cops were like total idiots. Because the woman, what happens in that one is that the woman, there's been 2 murders already. And then the main woman, her name is Julia, and she gets attacked by the killer, but then the killer is frightened off, but the killer thinks she's dead, but she's not. And so the police stage a mock funeral for her, so the killer thinks she's dead so they can draw him out. But then the cops are kind of useless, and then her and her boyfriend figure out what the connection is between all these seemingly unrelated victims, and they give the police a list of, hey, these women are going to get killed, and then the police just whiff it. So, it does really seem like Giallo's, unlike, the more police procedural type theme, Giallos are much more like fuck the police. Right. Or they're much more anti-authority because they're just they're useless, and the witness usually has to figure everything out because the police can't catch a cold, I guess.
Well, if the police were any good, the movie couldn't happen.
Well, exactly.
That's true.
Exactly.
That too. Yeah.
So that's kind of what happens with that. Oh, what? Oh, we're almost to the end. Oh, shit, already? Holy crap. But, Yeah, I think I mentioned everything I wanted to mention, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think you did.
I probably did.
Okay.
Well, I'm sure I probably forgot some shit, and then like an hour from now I'll be like, damn it, I forgot to say this and that, because like I said, I have all, and I get excited because I've seen so many of these. If you guys want to go to my blog, it's goddessofhellfire.com, and I've actually written about a lot of kind of the lesser known giallos. I wrote about Night Evelyn Came Out of the Grave, and I wrote about All the Colors of the Dark, and House of Laughing Windows, and a bunch of Bloodstained Shadow, I wrote about Perfume of the Lady in Black too, even though I don't think that's giallo. So if you want to go and read those, some of them are kind of funny. So if you want to read the breakdowns of them. But other than that, and also I wanted to remind everyone again that my new book is out, The Unseen Hand, if you're into poltergeist stuff. It's pretty much like 100 and something cases of poltergeist activity.
Yeah, it's gonna be a benchmark book in that subject. It's kind of like the old school books.
Yeah, kind of like an old, from the 70s when you had those parapsychologists like William Roll and stuff like that, when they were kind of writing those compilations of their cases and stuff. It's kind of like that.
Right. Stand right along with all that stuff.
Yeah. So I
used to love those.
Yeah, I did too. That's why I wanted to write one like that.
Yeah, I like them because they were creepy. They were kind of dry, and that dryness kind of made it creepy because you're just the police reported this and that and this and that. And so it's not like you're watching one of those lame new episodes of The Haunting,
where they're just like making everything up.
Yeah, making everything up as they go
along.
Like
a Hollywood ghost story type thing.
Right.
When that's not how it happened.
Although that sells. If you look at some of those books, those guys are just making shit up.
But to me, that's not as
scary.
Boy,
they got like over 1,000 reviews on
To me, that's
Amazon.
not as scary. And honestly, the same thing applies generally to horror fiction. It's why, other than giallos, like I said, I like giallos because they're over the top, but I don't think they're scary. The only horror movies that I find scary are movies that are real subtle.
Yeah.
Like a subtle psychological type that don't show much, but they just make, like I said, if something's going to scare me, it's going to be like a fucking David Lynch movie or something like that. It's not going to be like something with like ghosts popping out.
The only thing recently that scares me are things that are like super plausible. Like, what was that series of horror? They were like hour long, 200. I think it was
Masters of Horror. Well, that was from like 10 or 15 years ago.
Was it? Okay. Yeah. Well, they had that episode where those aliens sprayed
the screwfly solution.
So they sprayed something on the planet Earth, and it caused all of the men to kill all of the women.
Yeah, that's right.
That fucking freaked me out.
I know. I remember you being freaked out.
Oh man!
I like that one, but that wasn't my favorite. Yeah. My favorite one of those, and I actually wrote about these on my blog too. But my favorite episode of that, Imprint, was actually my favorite one. But my second favorite one was Cigarette Burns, the one with Norman Reedus, because I love the idea of a movie that would drive people crazy if they saw it. Yeah. I love that idea.
Oh yeah, I remember we saw that.
Remember?
Yeah.
And they had and there was that great fucking scene where like Udo Kier pulls out his intestines and threads them through the projector. Yeah. Oh, that was fucking awesome. Yeah, I loved that shit.
That was weird.
I love that shit. But like I said, it's funny because we were just talking about this the other day. I said if a horror movie, like I love horror movies of all kinds, but if a horror movie is going to scare me, ones that are not plausible scare me more than, like, ones that are about serial killers and shit like that. Like Rob Zombie movies or whatever. Right. They don't scare me as much as either ghost stories or like psychological kind of horror. Right. Like I said, one of the creepiest movies, like The Tenant.
Right.
That Roman Polanski movie.
Weird.
That's freaked the fuck out of me. That is a freaky ass movie.
I haven't seen that in a long time. I don't know if it's as weird
because ambiguity is much scarier to me. Like a serial killer, I'm like, it's a dude. He's a serial killer. Right. Big deal. It's like you can put a finger on it.
They used a lot of Roman Polanski samples out of that and put them in Skinny Puppy songs.
Yeah, they did. I mean, even though
close it down with that.
Even though Roman Polanski
take off my head, what do I see? In my head or me in my body?
Even though Roman Polanski is kind of a horrible person.
My intestines. I see me in my intestines.
Well, you just did it, so I don't have to. Even though Roman Polanski is a horrible person, he made some fucking awesome movies. Yeah. And I love The Tenant. It's actually one of my favorite movies. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up for this week about Giallo movies. And even though I'm not going to make Tom watch any because he probably won't like them, and then because he likes to hate on stuff.
No, I don't.
Yeah, you do.
No.
What? Where are you?
Just not too much into Italian movies that much. Although I would like to see the zombie movie.
Okay. Well, I'll show you. I don't know if you'll like it or not. You might.
Yeah.
You might dig it. I haven't seen it in a long time, so I don't know. I liked all of his Lucio Fulci zombie movies, actually. He made movies in pretty much every genre. He made like comedies, he made like sex comedies, he made cop buddy movies. He made all kind of shit. But he made some giallos too, Lizard in a Woman's Skin. And I think I mentioned a couple other ones. But he's probably best known for the zombie movies. But also, The Beyond is his best one. And I don't think anyone's going to fight me on that. Because The Beyond is probably his best movie. That's like his magnum opus.
Okay.
And that's kind of a zombie movie, I guess. There's kind of zombies in it. But not really. But, okay, so another shout out to Project Entertainment Network and Armand Rosamilia. Go to the Project Entertainment Network Patreon at patreon.com/projectentnet and give them $1 or $2. It supports our podcast and supports lots of other podcasts. They also have a store with shirts and buttons and all kind of stuff you can buy. And we have a store also at Zazzle.com/13o'clock where you can buy some t-shirts. And there's 5 different designs on there at the moment. Cool. All very cool. So go buy some and, come on, love us. And that'll do it for this week's episode.
Bye-bye.
Bye.